Welcome back, creeps and creatives, to Acrylics After Dark. I'm Luna Vale, and while I bring a pair of plain shoes to life, we are diving into the darkness of real crime, mystery, and the truly bizarre. You won't always know what I'm creating at first, but we will see this finished design together. So I'll link the products I'm using down below, and as always, I do have everything prepped and ready on this shoe. So get cozy, grab your drink, and settle in while we create art and cover today's tragic story. I do want to apologize in advance for any mispronunciation of names or cities. I will try my best, but I want to go ahead and apologize in advance just in case I mispronounce anything. I also want to let you guys know that there may be times where I have to use my heat gun to dry some of the paint. So I will pause the video and then pick it back up right afterwards. So anytime I need to correct or fix anything, um, if it's going to take me more than just a minute, I will make sure to pause the video and then pick it back up and everything. So hopefully my time doing these will get better and you'll enjoy it, which leads me to thank everybody for watching the very first episode of Acrylics After Dark. I appreciate the views. I appreciate you watching it. And again, I hope that um, you enjoy the content that I am creating. And if you have any tips or tricks, I always appreciate it and want to thank you. So thank you again. It means the world to me. And yeah, so before we begin, this episode contains mature content, including real crime, disturbing details, and graphic imagery. Viewer discretion is strongly advised for today's video. Today's story takes place in Japan in 1988. The victim was a young 17-year-old girl. She was a high school senior, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. And that was until her life was taken from her by four teenage boys who were looking to cause harm. Now, for 44 days, and this is this date is different everywhere you look for articles. Some say 40, some say 42, others say 44. For this purpose of today's story, I am just knowing it as 44 days. But for 44 days, this young girl would endure unimaginable torture. She would be stripped of her humanity and was left to suffer at the hands of these four monsters. Dozens watched, dozens took turns, dozens laughed at her pain. But I think the most tragic thing that happened is that dozens knew what was happening but chose to look the other way. If you know, this is the horrifying story of Junko Furuta. So Junko, sorry, was born on January 18th, 1971 in Masato, a small city in Saitama Prefecture, Japan. Hopefully I said that correctly. I'm so sorry if I didn't. But she was born in Masato, and Masato was just on the outskirts of Tokyo. It was known to be a very quiet, steady area. It really was untouched by the noise and the hubba bubba of the big city. This would be where Junko would spend her life with her parents, her older brother, and her younger brother. Now, she was known to be an exceptional student. She had amazing grades, near perfect attendance, and anything that she did, she gave her whole dedication into. Even her part time job at the plastics factory, she made sure to give it 110%. She was there on time, she made sure to stay. If they needed help, past her time, she would always stay as well. I mean, her family and her friends just admired her in more than one way, and that is, I mean, it's hard to see why not. She was just a thoughtful and very pure person. Now, after graduation, she had other dreams. She wanted to be an idol singer. She just loved the feel of a stage and the joy that it brought her and others. And she wanted to make this her career in her life. She ultimately just wanted a really good and happy life, and she wanted a life where she could support her family. After everything that they've done for her, helping her achieve her dreams, she wanted to make sure that she would be able to support them as well. Tragically, she never got the chance. Now, Junko was very beautiful. She was elegant, soft spoken. She was just a beautiful young woman inside and out. Unfortunately, this beauty attracted unwanted attention, as she would gain the attention of a former classmate known as Hiroshi Miyano. Now, he was captivated by her. I mean, he wanted Junko. He was also notorious for his violent behavior and often boasted to anyone that would hear about his connections to the Yakuza. Now, the Yakuza was referred to basically as the Japanese mafia. Now, when Miyano asked Junko out, she politely declined. Clearly, she heard the rumors. He's not shy about things that he did or has done, or the affiliations he has. He was not quiet about that, and this is something that Junko didn't want anything to be a part of. She did not want to be a part of anybody who lived their life in that way. Now, as you can imagine, this upset Miyano. I mean, this bruised his ego, and he was not having it. No, he was not used to rejection. He was not used to being told no. Anything that he wanted, he would get. Now, was it mainly out of fear? Yes. But anything he wanted, he would get, even out of his parents. His parents did not say no to him either. On November 25th, 1988, Hiroshi Miyano and his friend Shinji Minato would set out with the goal of abducting and assaulting local women. Now, this was not their first time. They have done this multiple times. But on this evening, unfortunately, Miyano would get the one thing that he wanted, as that evening they spotted Junko riding her bike home after leaving her part-time job at the plastic factory. Now, they acted quickly. Minato, acting on Miyano's orders, kicked Junko off her bike and fled the scene. Now, as you can imagine, she was stunned. I mean, she was sitting there on the ground, not sure what happened, and Miyano took this as his chance to play the Good Samaritan. He quickly ran over to Junko. "Oh my goodness, I saw what happened. Are you okay? I mean, just laying it on thick. I will escort you back home. That way you know you're safe and of course, Junko was shaken up and she accepted the offer. I mean, she didn't want anything to happen. If this just happened to her, sometimes things get worse. And so she accepted Miyano's offer. Now, there are mixed reports about whether Miyano offered to walk her home or if he offered her a ride in a vehicle. Either way, she accepted his help and he escorted her home. And I'm saying home loosely. Now, during their time of heading back to Junko's home, she was not familiar with the area. This was not the way that she would go home. And so she addressed this concern with Miyano. Now, he was very calm, very collected, didn't yell, didn't get angry. He reassured her that he knew exactly where he was going, and that she was safe. She would make it home. Now, as much as Junko was having those doubts, again, he was just very calm, and so she believed him. The closer that they got to these warehouses, though, the more that this red alarm started going off in her head. And unfortunately, this is when Miyano would turn and threaten Junko if she didn't listen, and he proceeded to assault her. Now, after the first initial assault, he then bragged about his Yakuza ties like he didn't brag enough throughout his life. But he took it a step further by saying that he would have them kill her or her family if she did not follow him to this hotel in Adachi. And of course, Junko complies. She doesn't want anything happening to her family, so she goes with him willingly. Well, not willingly, but she goes with him. She doesn't cause a scene. She doesn't ask for help because she doesn't want anything happening to her family. So this is where Miyano would again assault poor Junko. Now, later that evening, he was still hanging on to her. I'm not sure if Miyano was going to let her go at some point. I'm assuming so because of how his friend reacted. So I'm under the assumption that Miyano basically he calls one of his friends, Joe Agora, and he boasts about the assault and says he finally got what he wanted from Junko, and he's basically going to take his time and let her go. Now, Agora got excited to hear about this. And this is when he was very persistent. He insisted that Miyano keep her captive and that him and the boys can come join them in on the abuse and they can take things a step further if they really wanted to. Plus, if you let her go, she'll just run back home. Even worse, she'll just run to the police. And so Miyano was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So they agree that Miyano will just keep Junko with him at the hotel. Agora then contacts their other friends, Minato, and then a new friend, Yasushi Watanabe, and he basically told them about the situation. Now, again, they got very excited. They wanted to join in. And so this is when the four boys devised a plan. They agreed to meet Miyano at the park. And this is where we get a glimpse into the depth of human cruelty. And this is when we start seeing how this became one of Japan's most gruesome crimes in history. So on the morning of November 26th, Miyano took Junko to a park near the hotel where the boys planned it out. They met Agora, Minato, and Watanabe at the park. Now, the boys ahead of time already got themselves armed with information as they actually had Junko's belongings. Now, in her belongings, it had where she lived, it talked about her mom and dad. They had all this information. And so they used this against Junko. They threatened to kill her or her family, especially her family, if she ever tried to escape and if she didn't do what they said. Now, Junko basically felt like she had no other option. She didn't want anything to happen to her family, so she complied. She kneeled in the grass and waited for instructions. This basically confirmed to the boys that they could do whatever. And so they decided right then and there that the best thing to do was to keep Junko under the control and that if they keep her, they'll have continuous pleasure. Now, in order to do this, they needed a place that was secure and away from the public eye. And of course, Minato offered his home as the place. So they brought her to Minato's home, and this became the site of a nightmare that lasted 44 days. Every day that Junko was there, she was subjected to the uttermost torment, and her life was completely controlled by hell in human skin. Now, if you're wondering, Minato had his own home? No. No, he lived with his parents. But don't worry, I'm going to cover that because, any normal person would think, "Oh, well, he lives with his parents. How the heck is he going to do that? Like, how is he going to get her into the home?" Don't worry. They had a plan. They had a plan, and clearly it worked. But November 27th, this was just 2 days after, 2 days into Junko's captivity. Junko's parents reported her missing to the police. Now, they knew their daughter and they knew that she was not just the type to disappear without, any explanation. She wouldn't just leave and, not contact them. Just this sudden absence left her family very worried, and they were very desperate to find her. Now, I am not sure. Well, actually, yeah, I guess it makes sense. I'm assuming because of their ties to the Yakuza, the boys find out about the police report and they moved quickly. I mean, they were quick to rectify the situation before it got out of hand. They forced Junko to, so sorry. I know things are shaking and sorry, I'm going to apologize. I'm so sorry for the times that my camera is shaking. Eventually, I will find a better way. And if anybody has any tips, I appreciate it. But I apologize for any shaking that might happen. Um, I'm going to try to have a more stable foundation as well. So apologies. But again, they forced Junko to call home, not just once, but on three separate occasions. Now, the first two times that Junko called, clearly she was told a lie, and she told her family that she was staying with a friend, and she voluntarily ran away. It was her choice to run away. Now, her parents were torn about hearing this because they just knew their daughter. But they also knew that she was responsible, she was dependable, and even though they were connected, I mean, she is calling to tell them, so would she really call them if it was something more? Would she have notified them if it wasn't true? And so, they were just, you know, I think just confused with themselves. Was there more going on in her life that they didn't know about? Maybe she just needed a break. She's a good kid. Maybe she's just overwhelmed. And, again, because they were torn about what was happening, it would take the last call, the third phone call, to finally kind of solidify the results that the boys wanted. Now, I am not sure, but obviously on the last call and under extreme duress, Junko was forced to tell her mother and her father to stop the investigation. Now, I'm not sure what was exactly said. I'm assuming she probably had to say something harsh to really get her family to back off. I'm not sure, but whatever was said, it was enough to convince her parents, which ultimately derailed the investigation. They told the police not to worry about it, which I'm sure at this moment, I can only imagine the depth, the deep crushing despair that Junko felt as her only hope at that moment had just been torn away. And this would begin one of the most brutal acts of torture ever recorded. Now, again, I'm going to take a quick pause and I'm going to just advise everybody again that these next accounts of Junko's imprisonment will be deeply unsettling and graphic. So again, viewer discretion is advised. Now, we're back to Minato's home. And again, Minato had the grand idea of the boys using his home. Now he lived with his parents. So if you're wondering, Luna, how the heck did this go on at their home and they didn't know? Hmm. So to begin, when Junko first arrived, they forced her to pretend she was Minato's girlfriend. So whenever, Minato's parents were around, Junko would pretend that she was Minato's girlfriend. Now, this ruse worked initially. Initially, the parents did believe that this was really Minato's girlfriend, which, okay, makes sense. However, Junko never left. She always stayed. It's not like she left the home and came back. She always stayed. And what were days started turning into weeks. It became harder, I suspect, to ignore that something terrible was happening in Minato's room, as it should. I mean, with everything that happened, there's no way they didn't hear strange noises, they didn't hear her cries, they didn't hear loud banging. I mean, at one point, the boys would come in and out of the home whenever they wanted to, constantly throughout this time, especially at night. And every time they would return, they would always have somebody new. There would always be another man with them. Minato's parents and Minato's brother at this point knew she was being held against her will, but did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. Now, whether it was fear of the Yakuza or fear of their own son's wrath and the wrath of his friends, they stayed silent. For 44 days, Junko was held naked and repeatedly raped by the kidnappers, and it was said to be over by 100 men. 100 men they invited. She was raped approximately 400 times, if not more. But the horror didn't stop there. On the night of November 28th, the brutality inflicted on Junko had escalated to levels that we can't even imagine. On that night, the boys actually invited two other individuals to join them. Now, during this gathering, Junko would be repeatedly gang raped, and this was when the boys decided and made it their mission to accelerate and degrade her more. They basically wanted to one up themselves every chance that they got, which, you would think that there's no way they can do it, but clearly there was. She was, Junko was beaten with iron bars hung from the ceiling and used as a punching bag. She had weights dropped onto her stomach multiple times. She was forced to masturbate in front of them and was told to sing and dance while they beat her. They inserted many different objects into her body. They inserted bottles, iron rods. At one point, they even lit fireworks inside her. There were days where as many as 12 individuals would assault her in a single time span, in a single day. Now, if Junko resisted any of these attacks, or if she ever tried to escape, the punishment would be more severe than what she was already receiving. The brutality and the violence would be escalated. They, at one point, poured hot wax on her eyelids. They burned her skin with cigarettes and lighters. They would pull off fingernails and they would smash her bones with the weights. After 20 days, Junko could no longer walk. They would leave her on the balcony in the cold winter air, or they would leave her in a freezer for hours, forcing her to sleep exposed to freezing temperatures. As you can imagine, Junko would be deprived of proper food and water and proper nutrition, and she was often forced to eat either by the boys or just for her trying to survive, eat cockroaches and drink her own urine. And again, this was to survive. Her internal organs were so damaged, she could barely eat or move. Yet, she was kept alive, just barely. At one point, Junko was so close to being rescued, and I feel like this is where I feel like this is the most devastating thing probably is she actually managed to call the police. Now, I'm not sure how she got a hold of the house phone, but she got a hold of the house phone. She called police, but before she can even speak, they caught her. Now, the police did arrive at the Minato home where Junko was being held, but police were told some story. Oh, my son called by mistake. Whatever the story was, they didn't pursue any further. They didn't go and check in Junko's room. They didn't, or Junko, sorry. They didn't go check in Minato's room. They didn't go see if this was true. No, they left. Now, real quick, this origami bird, I am actually going to use a different paint. I just want to try something different, and so we're going to use the color changing paint from Tulip. Technically, it goes from sky blue to mint green, I think, or like a moss green. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I just wanted to let you guys know that this was what I was going to use for this section. And apologies. I feel like there's no good time to stop and say things, so I know sometimes when I'm addressing things, it's like I'm in this certain spot and I feel really bad, but I'll try to make it a smooth transition moving forward. But the police left. They ultimately left. And they didn't check in further. Now, as punishment for Junko doing this and almost getting caught, they burned Junko's feet with lighter fluid and beat her until she was barely conscious. As you can imagine, with the torture and abuse that the boys inflicted on Junko, there was one point where the boys had a hard time looking at Junko and just found her to be unattractive. So they decided they needed a new person. Now, they used the same ruse as they used on Junko on a 19-year-old girl that was walking home. However, they did not actually keep her captive. I'm not sure what happened or what changed their mind, but they did end up letting this girl go. But not before they assaulted her multiple times. Now, on January 4th, 1989, the boys basically were bored. I mean, they've done everything that they've been wanting to do so far, and so they wanted something new to do. And of course, they wanted to force Junko to carry out this new idea that they had. Now, it's not something that you would think. They wanted Junko to play a game of mahjong against them. Now, despite everything that Junko went through and the condition she was in, just a reminder, she could not walk. She could barely move. She's not really eaten. I mean, she is barely hanging on. And they wanted her to play this game. Not only did she play, she won. She beat them. Good for you, Junko. Now, I don't know how. I don't know how she mustered up the courage, the energy. I don't know if it was just her chance of her last act of defiance, if she knew that her time was coming to an end. I'm not sure, but she decided she was not going to just let them win, that she would win this game. And as you can imagine, that tiny act of defiance infuriated them, especially Miyano. He acted swiftly with rage. His response was lighting a candle, which he allowed hot wax to drip onto Junko's face. He then placed two shortened candles on her eyelids, letting the wax drip into her eye sockets. Then they kicked her with such a force that was so great, she fell onto a stereo unit. Now, I don't know if the impact of her hitting the stereo unit, if it just kind of triggered something, or I'm not sure, but whatever happened, it triggered Junko into having very violent convulsions. I mean, at this point, her body was clearly responding to the overwhelming trauma it had been enduring. And this was basically like the last straw. Now, they found this to be them losing control because they didn't want this. They didn't know why she was just convulsing. They didn't tell her she could do this. And so they found this as them losing control, and they wanted desperately to regain control of the situation. Now, their way of gaining control was to basically accelerate the brutality that they were inflicting on Junko. They bound their hands in plastic bags and proceeded to beat Junko. They would drop an iron exercise ball repeatedly onto her abdomen. And as if that wasn't enough, Miyano then doused Junko's body in lighter fluid and proceeded to light her on fire. Around 10 a.m. on January 4th, 1989, Junko finally succumbed to her injuries. Now, the boys would wrap her body in blankets and then put her in a large travel bag where they transported her body to a construction site. This is where they would then stuff Junko into a 55-gallon metal drum and would proceed with filling it with quick drying concrete. Now, once it was filled up, they would then leave the drum in this vacant construction site under some debris. And her body, they were certain her body would not be recovered. There's just no way. For nearly 2 months, Junko's body remained hidden in the drum. I mean, her family basically just completely unaware of what happened to their daughter, still under the assumption that she voluntarily ran away, that, you know, she chose to not be with them for whatever reason. And I did try to see, and maybe I missed the information, but it wasn't known whether they continued contacting the police or what. But at this point, they just, we do know that they were unaware of the entire situation that was happening. And of course, the boys were thinking that they got away with murder. Oh, okay. Clearly, I am having a hard time with the shoe, and I'm realizing now that I've done this completely wrong. So I'm going to undo this. Let me correct this, and I'll be right back. Now, in late February, early March 1989, Miyano and Agura were arrested for the abduction and gang rape of the 19-year-old woman they assaulted back in December. Do you remember? They let her go. And I'm sure at that point, Agura is probably like, this is what I warned you about. But during interrogation, Miyano slipped up. Yes, he did. He at one point believed that Agura confessed to Junko's murder. And so he panics and he thinks, okay, I've got to, because they always say there's a deal for the first one that speaks or whatever else. So he panics, and in his panic, he confessed and he revealed the location of the drum, thinking during this entire time that his involvement was already known, that this was what they were in there for. Anyways, he didn't even realize it was for the 19-year-old they assaulted. They thought it was for Junko. So on March 29th, 1989, Junko was finally found. Police discovered the drum where Miyano stated. It was partially buried among the construction debris. Inside, they uncovered Junko's body, and it was completely encased in concrete. Now, the extent of her injuries were so horrific that one of the forensic examiners reportedly broke down in tears, especially after they discovered that Junko was actually pregnant. She wound up being pregnant during the assault, but the thing is they were completely baffled by this. I mean, she went through complete abuse. I mean, the severe damage to her uterus should have made it impossible for her to get pregnant, but she wound up getting pregnant. They also found that when they placed her in the drum, they also left a blown light bulb inside her. Now, I'm not sure how they determined, but they did determine that it was like that before they put her in. So it didn't break because of the drum, it was already broken. And again, I'm not sure how they came to that conclusion, but it's terrible. And as you can imagine, Miyano, Minato, Agura, and Watanabe, the four main perpetrators, were brought in. Now, they were all under 18, and so they were tried as juveniles. Their identities were initially hidden, but Japanese journalists released their names, arguing that the crimes were too heinous for anonymity. And they were right. I mean, why should they be left anonymous just because they're underage? They decided to do this heinous act. The world should know who they are. All four boys were found guilty by the Tokyo District Court for several charges. There was the charge of abduction for the purpose of sexual assault, confinement, rape, murder, and the abandonment of a corpse. However, the sentences that they each received was not justice, and it sparked outrage across Japan and the entire world, as it should have. So, Hiroshi Miyano, the ringleader, was initially sentenced to 17 years. Now, he appealed for leniency, which, I'm sorry, it made me laugh. Like, I'm sorry, what? Leniency? For what reason? Now, this results in an increased sentence, which I got excited for. There was a whole bunch of emotions when I was reading this. I got excited for this. However, it just increased by 3 years. So Hiroshi literally only got 20 years in prison. 20. Now, Joe Agora, he's the one who advised Miyano to not let Junko leave in the first place. He was sentenced 5 to 10 years. Now, he did serve the maximum duration of 10 years. Wow, 10 years. What'd you do? Yasushi Watanabe, he was sentenced to 5 to 7 years. I believe he served the whole 7. Again, wow, 7 years. And then we had Senji Minato, who was sentenced to 5 to 9 years. Now, it didn't specify if Minato served the entire 9 years. I'm hoping so, at least hoping he did the max, but either way, I mean, you have one person doing 20 years and the rest of them literally did 10 years or less, which is just mind-boggling. Now, these sentences were the result of Japan's juvenile justice system, which the purpose of this system was to prioritize rehabilitation over retribution for offenders that were under the age of 20. Okay, great. For maybe somebody that gets caught smoking weed or, you know, breaks breaking and entering or something that's not murder and rape. I mean, their crimes were so heinous. What did you think you were going to rehabilitate? So none of the boys received life sentences. Junko's family and much of Japan, like myself, were outraged. And I forgot that the shoe was wet. Okay, so Minato's parents, the ones who allowed the torture to take place in their home, were never charged. Okay, never charged. But hey, they had to pay 50 million yen, which is about $350,000 in US dollars. So I guess that's something. They were ordered to pay this to Junko's family as compensation. Now, I want to remind you, over 100 people knew of Junko's captivity. Not just Minato's parents, over 100 people. Every single man that was there that had their way with her as well. Over 100 people knew about her captivity. Again, mostly all of them directly participating in the abuse, and yet no one had come forward to help her. Now, during the court and everything, the whole extent of what happened to Junko was brought to light. And of course, Junko's mother just was devastated to hear all the horrifying details in court, and she unfortunately had to be hospitalized. Eventually, she required long-term care in a psychiatric hospital to cope with the trauma. Her father dealt with this by just being consumed by grief and rage and just became a very angry person. Ultimately, Junko's family was shattered. By the late 1990s, early 2000s, all four boys would be released, having completed their sentencing. All four boys. Yasushi Watanabe was released in 1996. Upon leaving prison, he left his hometown to live with his mother. nothing really else was known about him. Shinji Minato was released in 1998 and went on to live with his mother, but was arrested again in 2018 on suspicion of attempted murder. So the incident was reported to have occurred on a street in Kawaguchi, where Minato struck a 32-year-old man in the shoulder with a metal baton and then slashed his neck with a knife during a dispute over what? A parking space. In 2019, he was supposed to be sentenced to a year and 6 months in prison. Did he serve this time? No, he did not. The sentence was suspended, and probation was imposed for 3 years. Now, Minato's parents were left with no choice but to sell their family home, during this time to provide the compensation of the 50 million yen to Junko's family. Joe Agora was released from prison in 1999. Now, he was allowed to change his last name. Why? I don't know. Personally, in my opinion, I believe that if you commit a heinous crime, you should not be allowed to change your name. That should not be allowed to happen. But he was allowed to change his name. He changed his last name to Kamisaku, and briefly after his release, he worked in IT. But ultimately, he went right back to organized crime, and in 2004, he was arrested for assaulting a former friend. Now, he suspected his friend of becoming romantically involved with his own girlfriend. Whether it was true or not, we honestly do not know. So Agora forced his friend into the trunk of his car, transported him to his mother's bar in Misato, where he brutally assaulted him for 4 hours. Now, you would think with this crime that maybe he got life in prison or, a longer sentence. No, for this crime, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was released in 2009. Now, I do want to mention his mother. So his mother was actually said to have smeared red paint all over Junko's grave and would cry out, blaming Junko for her son's woes. Everything that was going on with her son, she blamed it on Junko. Pretty sure it wasn't her fault, but you know. As for Hiroshi Miyano, after his release in 2009, he was also allowed to change his last name. Again, don't think they should be allowed to, but that's just me. For Miyano, he changed his last name to Yokoyama. However, nothing else changed about him. Shocker. In 2013, he was arrested on suspicion of bank fraud and orchestrating scam telephone calls, but despite the allegations, he refused to cooperate and ultimately was not charged. So I'm not sure exactly the, fine details about it, but honestly, I did just a very simple search on after because I truly did not want to see the life that they had afterwards. I did not want to know if their life ended in cupcakes and rainbows because I think that would upset me more since they violently stole another life. But I want to end Junko's story not on where they were, but actually on her funeral. So Junko Furuta's funeral was held April 2nd, 1989. One of her classmates stood and delivered a eulogy that was written collectively between all of her classmates. And it stated, quote, Jun-chan, welcome back. I never dreamed we would meet again like this. You were subjected to such cruelty, weren't you? You went through so much, didn't you? I'm upset with myself that I went on living unaware of what was happening. You were always so gentle and cheerful, Jun-chan. The coat we made for the cultural festival looked wonderful on you. I'll never forget that. We will absolutely not let Juchan's death be in vain. As we step into adulthood, we'll strive for a world where such heinous crimes no longer exist. We'll do our best, keeping Junchan in our hearts and pushing forward. The principal even brought your diploma. Thanks to this, all 47 of us in class 3 were able to graduate. Junchan, there's no more pain or suffering now. Rest peacefully. Farewell, Junchan. End quote. And I will greatly apologize if I messed up the pronunciation of how they said her name. Now, throughout this piece, I wanted to create something beautiful in remembrance of Junko, but not be insensitive. I went with the cherry blossom tree and the leaves blowing in the wind. And I just wanted to do this in a way to honor her story. You know, I'm reminded, outlining this, that her endurance and her bravery and her spirit was one that was never broken. I mean, even when she couldn't walk or move, she still defied them. And I just see her courage. So I will finish these finishing touches, put the shoelaces on, and I will be right back. I'm back. So I did seal these shoes with the acrylic matte finisher, and which will make sure that they stay sealed. I do want to give my closing thoughts that Junko Furuta's story is not just one of suffering, it's a mirror to our systems, our responsibilities, and the dangers of silence. As creatives and as humans, we must remember her in every story that we cover together. So if you made it to the end of this video, I want to thank you. You've honored Junko by witnessing her story and listening. I just appreciate you all so much. Please like, subscribe, and share if this story moved you. I would love to know your comments down below. Should juvenile offenders face adult sentences in cases like this? Or, what could have been done differently? Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and keep creating in the dark. If you want your own pair of shoes created or have a story to go along with it, let me know. There will be a link down below. But I'm Luna Vale, and this has been Acrylics After Dark, Art Meets Aftermath. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.